Hello, dear friends. Shabbat Shalom. I'm Mark Golub, and it's always wonderful to end the week with a moment together with all of you. I hope you're all continuing to do really well. And while there still may be legal wrangling over the outcome of the elections, I don't doubt that many of you feel as I do. I'm just glad it's over. The voting is over anyway. I'm sure many of you are thrilled with the results. I'm sure many of you are upset by the results, but it's done. And now we can all move on, hopefully to better times, more relaxed times, less angry times. I am looking forward to that very, very much. As far as COVID is concerned, clearly there is a surge in diagnosed cases around the world and in the United States, and that's troubling to be sure. We are not yet free of this pandemic, and that puts a strain on all of us, especially those of us in the older demographic. So I hope all of you are continuing to stay safe, guard yourself and your loved ones by wearing masks whenever you leave the home, maintaining social distance at all times, avoid being indoors for any length of time, some say for no more than 15 minutes, and that we wash our hands upon returning home and use disinfectants whenever possible. And as serious a virus as COVID-19 is, the overwhelming evidence is that if one stays in one's home or apartment as much as possible, and if one follows the rules, the chances of contracting the virus are very, very small. The problem for most of us, however, is emotional. Human beings are social beings. You've heard me say many times, I believe the most insightful verse in the entire book of Genesis is the line that says, "It is not good for a person to be alone." It actually says it's not good for a man to be alone, which is why the Torah describes how a man leaves his parents' home, the home of his mother and his father, and cleaves unto his wife, and they become one flesh, one new entity of human life. But it's really not about male and female. The insight applies universally to all of us, men and women. Loneliness is the most difficult burden and pain. If one has someone to share the blows of life with, one can endure almost anything. And without someone to share life with, the challenges of life can seem to be overwhelming. And that's why I keep saying to any of you who are currently forced to live alone, especially during this pandemic, I want you to understand, I am with you. JBS is with you. Everyone who's part of JBS cares deeply about you and is with you. And we will do everything we can to make JBS programming of interest to you, not simply to inform or educate, but to give you hours and hours of enjoyment and to be with you throughout the day, throughout the night. And in this regard, I want to express a special thanks to the wonderful people at Central Synagogue and at the Hampton Synagogue, and during these past high holidays, Sinai Temple of Los Angeles. It's simply wonderful that they're permitting us to televise their services on JBS so that you can participate and remain actively involved with and a part of Jewish community and Jewish prayer. So to Rabbi Angela Buchdahl and Cantor Dan Mutlu and the entire staff at Central Synagogue, and to Rabbi Mark Schneier and Kendall Nathaniel Hirschtick and the entire staff at the Hampton Synagogue, and to Rabbi David Wolpe and Cantor Marcus Feldman and the entire staff at Sinai Temple. On behalf of the entire JBS viewing family, we thank you for sharing yourselves and your services with America through JBS. And I also want to thank those of you who have written me such lovely and kind emails and letters about JBS, and sometimes about me. And every email and letter I receive, which lets us know how much you appreciate JBS. I can't tell you how it means the world to all of us. I want to give you an example of a few typical emails that have been sent by viewers. The first reads, "Thank you all at JBS for your wonderful programming. I am one of those solitary, older, mostly homebound Jewish people Rabbi Golub often speaks about. JBS has given me a beautiful window into a world I thought was lost to me. I am so grateful for having found you." And then Harvey of Rockville, Maryland writes, "JBS has provided me with many wonderful hours of information, entertainment, and enjoyment. During this COVID-19 period, it has been especially comforting to visit with you and JBS." Then he writes, "I record all the Central Synagogue Friday 6 p.m. Sabbath services, L'chaim programs, and films. I've been providing gifts to JBS since I discovered your channel a few years ago. Keep up the great work. Harvey of Rockville, Maryland." That's a very lovely email. Then I received some very lovely emails regarding our series Jewish 101. Here's what Suzanne writes. "Dear Rabbi Golub, I'm a Jewish woman, 77 years old, bat mitzvahed 55 years ago. That ended my Jewish education." By the way, is that not so typical of American Jewish life? So many people are educated through their 13th birthday. Boys and girls, then they become bar mitzvah, in this case, Suzanne's case, bat mitzvah, and they walk out of the cheder, they walk out of the Hebrew school, they walk out of Jewish education. It is one of the biggest problems the Jewish community faces, and it faces it in part by its own doing. You know, there's a phrase in the Torah that describes us, Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. Well, very often we seem to take that phrase, especially when it comes to Jewish education, much too literally. As controversial as it may sound, Jewish education really is not for children. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't educate children. We have a whole series, Shalom Kids, here on JBS, where we're trying to educate viewers' children in some small way. But in reality, it is not Jewish children who are ready for the genius and the insights and the understanding of the challenges of life and how one is to deal with it, the embrace of life that is Judaism. Judaism is this marvelous celebration of life meant for adults. How many of you went to Hebrew school and you used the machberet, the notebook, with Maimonides' picture on it? For tens of thousands of Jews, the image of Jewish education is that machberet cover. But if you ask them, who was Maimonides? What was Maimonides' contribution to Jewish life? For the most part, no one knows. Because Maimonides, who wrote on the one hand the Mishnah Torah, the code of Jewish law that became the basis upon which much of the Shulchan Aruch is based, which is the guide to how Jews live in an Orthodox traditional setting. And it was Maimonides who wrote Guide for the Perplexed, Moreh Nevuchim, a fabulous, huge treatise meant for committed Jews who were still confused because of the way in which the Torah can be read or should be read. And I've said this many times to you. Maimonides points out much of the Torah is a mashal. That's not Mark Golub's word. That's Maimonides' word. A mashal is a metaphor. For Maimonides, so much of the Torah is to be understood as poetry. Not that it isn't true. Of course it's true. Some of the greatest truth comes through poetry. But Maimonides' point is that much of the Torah is read with midrash, understanding that the literal words of the Torah are a hint at the truth of Torah. Well, that's not something you teach a 10-year-old or 11-year-old who is a human being with feelings, but is still prepubescent, is not married, doesn't have a job and have to worry about a mortgage or sending kids to school or how to handle kids during a COVID crisis, who doesn't struggle with some of the problems involved in marriage or taking care of older parents. The genius of Torah is for adults. And so when a child becomes bar mitzvah, at 13, by the way, more of a child than they were hundreds of years ago. When a child becomes bar mitzvah and leaves Hebrew school, Talmud Torah, even day school, there's a world of Jewish knowledge still to be imparted, to be imbibed, that shapes Jewish identity, Jewish personality, and the Jew's way, him or herself, of embracing life, of treating other people, and of loving life. And yet so many Jews experienced what Suzanne experienced. At 55 years old, 55 years ago, she was bat mitzvah, and then she writes, that ended my Jewish education. And she goes on, spiritually, culturally, I consider myself Jewish, although not connected religiously, nor have I membership with any synagogue. Again, so typical of the vast majority of secular Jews who are not affiliated. Suzanne is representing so honestly so much of what Jewish life is today in America. And not only in America, but we're talking about America. So, she has no membership with any synagogue. Then she writes, I do watch services during the holidays on your channel and have made donations to JBS. I just finished watching your presentation of Jewish 101, in which you discuss the Torah and the scholar's interpretation. I am writing to tell you how moving I found this program to be, and clearly gave me knowledge I lacked. Your discussions are very clear, and I want to thank you for putting a smile on my face along with a tear in my eyes. Sincerely, Suzanne. A smile on the face and a tear in the eyes. Isn't that sweet? And every one of you that takes time to write this kind of email, to let us know what we're doing is meaningful to you. What a gift you're giving us. What a gift you're giving me. And I also want to thank those of you who send us financial support so that we can continue to produce JBS on American television with all the diverse and varied programming you see on JBS. And you understand, no one likes to ask other people for money. Nonprofit executives will tell you all the time, the fundraising part of running any nonprofit is the hardest, least fun part of their job. But if the nonprofit is doing something important, then asking people for support shouldn't be hard. And I am so gratified that so many of you find JBS to be doing something important for Jewish life and the Jewish community and for the state of Israel. That you're prepared to support JBS with your tzedakah dollars. So thank you. Your financial support is the highest compliment you can give JBS. And I treasure each and every one of you. And that's all the time we have for this edition of Gam Yachad, Together During COVID-19. So let me end by reminding you that if you have a simcha or any kind of upcoming family event, or if there's someone who's ill whom you'd like to mention for a Misha Berach, or if there's a yortzeit and you have no synagogue setting in which the name can be read, please feel free to email me the information and I'll be honored to read it on JBS. The email address to us is jbscommunity@jbstv.org. Or you can write to Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut, 06904. And so until the next time, I'm Mark Golub, wishing every one of you a beautiful and restful Shabbat. Stay safe and be well, my friends. Shabbat Shalom.